Welcome to Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery. My name is Mark. On this channel, I offer literary works, all of which I have composed and to which I still retain the copyright. Today I'm presenting two short stories. The first is entitled A Grave Error. Residents of New Jersey may be pleased to have a tale set in the Garden State. Here it is. Immediately after all 6 men had found a place to sit, Snake's scarred face assumed a grim demeanor. Looking them squarely in the eye, he warned, "I'm gonna say this just once. If any of yez screws up the plan, I'm gonna cut yez into little pieces and feed you to the fish. You understand?" There was no reply, but Snake could tell that all had absorbed the message. And indeed they had. Gabe and Jamal instantly recalled the Newport News heist of the previous year, which had failed because Nobby Hagens had brought the wrong explosives. They remembered vividly driving afterwards to a deserted beach and watching the screw-up beg for his life before Snake strangled him with his bare hands. "Now that we got that straight," said the leader, we's ready to discuss the plan. But first, let me introduce you to one another. We got two newcomers that ain't worked with us before. All of yous knows Sammy Valdez. Well, he recommended these Puerto Rican guys. The tall one with the mustache is Miguel Escalante, and the guy with the beer belly is Pepe Onofre. According to Sammy, they's both good with the guns. Now, for yous Puerto Ricans, let me introduce my guys. The little man with the ugly face over there by the wall is Wayne Warner. He's a car man. Gabe Sutton, next to me, can pick any lock in the world, and he's good with explosives too. The brother over there with all them muscles is Jamal Blaylock, and the guy next to him with all the tattoos is Hud Corcoran. Before I go into the plan, I want yous all to know something about me. I've been breaking the law all my life, stealing, killing, doing whatever. Big jobs, little jobs, don't matter. Except for one time, when I was 21, I ain't never been caught. You want to know why? I'm smart, and I plan carefully. Every job has two parts, the planning and the execution. For this job we're gonna do, I've already done the planning. Now comes the execution. I know I done my part right. Let's see if you guys can do your part right. This time, the rewards is big. We's gonna steal $4 million. All of yous gets one share for your execution. I gets two shares, one for my planning and one for my execution. When you divides $4 million by 8 shares, you gets $500,000. That's what each of you's gonna get so long as you executes right. Snake Delmonico's threat to cut into little pieces anyone who failed to execute properly made a firm impression on most of his listeners. Professionals with hard faces and hard hearts, they grasped fully the underworld system of justice. But there was among this group one who trivialized the warning. To him, Snake's words were mere puffery, big words intended to show who was boss. Since the age of 18, Wayne Warner had been rejected for admission into the gang. Snake thought he was too immature. The leader relented when Wayne's older brother Ralph, a loyal associate, was gunned down by police. Now, at age 22, Wayne was about to participate in the third criminal caper of his life. On October 29, 2 weeks from today, a Brinks armored car will leave New York headed for Philly. In that car will be $4 million in cash. On the way, the vehicle will make a quick pickup at the Roma Bank in Trenton. That's where we's going to hit 'em. The pickup is scheduled for 4:10 p.m., 10 minutes after the bank's closing. The armored car will park in front of the bank on Hamilton Avenue. We'll be sitting in a stolen van a few feet away, wearing gloves and plastic masks. All of us, except Wayne, will surround that car as soon as its back door opens. You Puerto Ricans take care of the guards. Shoot 'em or disarm 'em. Wayne will back up the van to the armored car. Then Gabe, Jamal, Hud, and me will form a line and transfer the bags of money from the Brinks car to our van. We gotta be quick. No more than 10 minutes. When we finish, all of us gets into the van and Wayne drives us away. A few blocks east of the bank, a pickup truck registered to HUD will be sitting just inside St. Mary's Cemetery. Beside it will be a van registered to me. We'll transfer all the money to HUD's truck. Then we'll put our guns, masks, and gloves in a plastic bag in the same vehicle. After covering the back of the pickup with a top, all of us except HUD gets in the van and drives south. Disguised as a cemetery worker, HUD will dig 2 graves far apart. In one, he'll put the bag with the guns, masks, and gloves. In the other, he'll bury the money in a waterproof container. Afterward, he'll drive the pickup to meet us. We'll ditch the car used in the robbery a few miles away. "Where are we going to go with the van?" asked Gabe. "Atlantic City. In my van will be fishing equipment. If the cops stop us and ask us what we's doing, we can say we're on vacation. Our plan is to gamble and fish in Atlantic City. Everything in the van and the pickup will be clean. They won't be able to tie us to the bank job." Murmurs of satisfaction passed among the gang members. All agreed it was a good plan. The Puerto Ricans complained that HUD would have the opportunity to betray them and steal the money for himself. But Snake overcame their concerns with the argument that there was less risk that way than trying to drive the money all the way to Atlantic City. Everyone laughed at the idea of having the loot in a grave only blocks from the site of the theft. Snake had special instructions for each participant. Wayne, for example, was directed to leave the bank rapidly after the holdup, but to approach the cemetery at a slow speed. HUD was told to select old graves as digging sites. For 2 weeks, the leader drilled and tested his charges. He paid attention to every detail, and he made sure they did too. Now and then he reminded them of the fatal consequences for making an error. The preparation seemed to be going well, but then a problem arose. Meteorologists predicted that a major storm might strike New Jersey October 28th or 29th. In that event, Trenton would experience heavy rain. After weighing this information, Snake decided not to call off the scheme. If precipitation might complicate the theft, it might also cover up the retreat. On the day before the heist, Snake held a final review. Each participant had to explain in detail his actions at every stage of the operation. When this survey had been completed to his satisfaction, the leader made a shocking announcement. "I know you's all anxious to get your mitts on the money, but that won't happen until 6 months from now." There were immediate protests. Anticipating this reaction, Snake waited a while before raising his hands to silence the men. And then he said, "That's enough. It ain't no good to steal money if you gets caught right away and don't get to spend it. That's exactly what would happen if I gave you the money in a couple of days. Some of yous would go out and drop 20 grand at the racetrack or on some dumb broad. Word would get around that you got all this money. Then the cops would ask you to tell them how you got all the dough. Pretty soon we'd all be in the slammer. But if we wait 6 months until the heat cools down, we can enjoy our money with no problems. So that's what we's gonna do." Despite continued grumbling, Snake's views prevailed. As anxious as they were to get their hands on the money, gang members knew he was right. The holdup proceeded as planned. Although rain poured in torrents and wind blew furiously, the weather did not impede the enterprise. However, as the bandits fled from the scene, an exultant Wayne Warner carelessly failed to note a female pedestrian scurrying across the street to escape the rain. The collision killed her and sent the body flying through the air. Wayne hesitated just a moment before accelerating away from the scene. At St. Mary's Cemetery, no one spoke of the accident. In silence, the men completed the task of transferring the money. Then they placed the guns, masks, and gloves into the plastic bag on the truck. After the tarp had been put in place, Snake spoke. "You remember how I warned you not to screw up?" Gang veterans knew what would follow. Wayne trembled a bit. He was about to speak when Snake stabbed him in the abdomen. It took 4 thrusts to produce death. Before departing in the van, Snake ordered HUD to dig 3 graves. Soon after their departure, the wind and rain intensified to near gale force. By the time HUD had dug the first grave, darkness had enveloped the cemetery. To dig 2 additional graves under such conditions would be a long and nasty job. Was it really necessary? Disobeying Snake was dangerous business, but how would Snake ever learn what had happened? HUD placed Wayne's body, the waterproof bag with the money, and the plastic bag with all the accessories in the same grave. Gathering up his shovel, the man was about to drive away in the empty pickup when he thought of something important. Snake would ask exactly where he had hidden the loot. Returning to the grave, HUD tried unsuccessfully to read the name on the tombstone. It was too dark. In the wind and rain, matches were useless. HUD ran his fingers over the letters etched into the stone. Despite the difficulty, he managed to determine that the last name was Smith. He was starting to work on the first name when the lights of an approaching vehicle forced him to flee. Although he hadn't learned the complete first name, he was sure it began with the letter J. The gravedigger had deviated from his leader's plan in one other respect as well. Knowing that the gang would not have access to the money for 6 months, HUD had removed $10,000 from the money container before burying it, something to tide him over until the big payday. The group hadn't counted the take after the robbery, so none of them knew the exact total. $10,000 was just a trifle anyway, in HUD's mind. If the disobedient one had possessed the brains of Snake, he would have hidden the 10,000 immediately and then proceeded in a law-abiding manner to Atlantic City. Instead, the fool threw caution to the wind. Ecstatic, he whooped and hollered in the pickup while driving at high speed. Reaching the village of Columbus, he pulled into a roadside tavern. 3 beers later, he roared down the highway even faster than before. Near the village of Atrion, a state trooper pulled him over. Smelling beer and noting a stack of $20 bills on the seat, the lawman arrested him. The next morning, officials grilled Hud about the Roma bank robbery. Although they could not tie him directly to the crime, there was strong circumstantial evidence of culpability. Witnesses had seen a pickup like his traveling south at high speed, just outside of Trenton 3 hours after the crime. Hud had in his possession $10,000 in cash for which he could not account. He had no alibi, and he refused to talk. At trial, he was charged not only with grand theft, but also with the murder of the pedestrian killed in the getaway. Hud was sentenced to 15 years in prison. With good behavior, he would be out in 10. Snake and the rest of his gang did not entirely escape the reach of the law. They were rounded up in Atlantic City and subjected to lengthy interrogation. To investigators of the Roma bank job, the Delmonico crew ranked high on their list of suspects, but eventually they were set free. As Snake had planned, there was insufficient evidence to secure a conviction. 3 months into Hud's sentence, Snake paid a visit to his man at East Jersey State Prison in Rahway. The incarcerated one felt very nervous about this encounter. Clearly, Snake was there to learn about the location of the loot, but Hud had reasoned to surrender that information would surely mean giving up his share of the money and perhaps his life as well, especially if he told the truth. In the surly face of his chief, Hud read a rage to kill the screw-up. Once Snake knew the location of the money, he would die in prison. Hud's first words were, "I ain't gonna tell ya." A look of surprise passed over Snake's face, followed by a smile. "What you mean?" he asked. "Just like I said," declared Hud. "I ain't gonna tell you where the loot is. When I get out, I'll go get it, and then we'll divide it up." "Now, why would you go do a thing like that?" asked Snake. Hud replied, "For security purposes, if you know what I mean." "Don't worry about security," said Snake. "Me and the boys just want to spend a little of the money. Tell you where it is, and we'll put you a share in the bank if you wants." "How much did we get?" asked Hud. Snake laughed. "I don't know," he replied. "Did you count it before you buried it?" Wondering if Snake was hinting at the $10,000 found on him at the time of his arrest, Hud didn't know how to reply. Silence followed a weak smile. Finally, Snake said, "According to the papers, we got 3,500,000. In a 7-way split, that's $500,000 per share." "But it's 8 shares, Hud corrected. Snake stared at the prisoner. "Remember, it's only 7. Wayne had a little accident after the heist." Hud remembered all right. He also knew that Snake never forgave mistakes. "Okay, Hud, so you gonna make us wait till you gets out?" "Got to, Snake." "How long you gonna enjoy the comforts of Rahway?" 15. 10 with good behavior. "Make it 10, Hud. Me and the boys is already impatient, if you knows what I mean." For the next 10 years, Hud was a model prisoner. He spent half his time dreaming about how he would spend his money, and the other half wondering whether Snake would let him live to enjoy it. Many a night he experienced the same dream. Snake and the boys are waiting for him outside the prison walls. When he's released, they escort him directly to St. Mary's Cemetery. After digging up the loot, Snake stabs him to death just as he had Wayne Warner. Time after time, he sought a way to avoid this ending. Finally, the release date arrived. Stepping through the prison gate, Hud could see his nightmare begin to materialize. There, awaiting him in cars, were Snake and the gang. All had smiles on their faces. Hugs and back slaps stirred no emotional response from the newly freed man. He knew this was all a show. Inside, every one of them longed for the money and loathed the man who had delayed their enjoyment of it. "So, is we ready to go?" a smiling Snake asked. "To the cemetery?" inquired Hud. "Course," replied Snake. "What you think? We's going to church?" The gang laughed. "No, I ain't going with you guys. I'm going alone," affirmed Hud. "I'll meet you later, and then we can divide up the loot." Snake laughed and said, "Come on now, you ain't afraid of us, is ya? We ain't got no hard feelings, does we, boys?" "Nah," said Gabe. "All we wants is our money," said Miguel. A sober-faced Hud replied, "I'm still not going with ya. We're going to do this my way." Okay, laughed Snake. "That's gratitude after all we done for yez. But have it your way. First, me and the boys has a little surprise for ya. Across the street, see that shiny new car? I bought it new just yesterday. Right after you hands us the loot, I'm going to sign that car over to ya. How you like them apples?" Hud looked at the car, and then he turned to Snake and said, "That's nice, but I'm still going to do the cemetery. I'm going to the cemetery alone. You're going to have to trust me. I'm going to divide all the money into equal shares. Then I'll put them into separate bags. Monday at 3 in the afternoon, I'll park my car in front of the 5th Street Precinct headquarters in the Bronx. When each of you guys drops by, I'll get each of you a bag. Simple." When gang members started to grumble, Snake silenced them. To Hud he said, "Sounds like you got a good plan. If that's what you wants, that's what you gets." As more grumbling erupted, Snake cut it short. "Tell you what," he said to Hud, "that car was intended as a sort of reward for not ratting on us. Seeing that you ain't got no wheels, I'm going to give yous the key to that car right now. Coming out of the slammer, you shouldn't have to walk." Snake handed the keys to Hud. The latter looked at them briefly. Then he turned and began to walk toward the vehicle. Abruptly, he stopped and turned around. His final comment was, "Don't follow me." Snake shook his head and said, "Nah, don't worry about nothing." As the car drove away, Jamal erupted in anger. He said to Snake, "We could have let that guy get away. What's to prevent him from keeping all the money for himself?" Snake glared at him and said, "Now I consider that comment an insult. You think I ain't got no brains? I didn't give that rat no car for nothing. It's bugged with a tracking device. We's gonna know where he is at all times. Let me do the worrying. You just follow orders." Hud intended to implement the plan that he had outlined to Snake. But driving away from the prison, he noted in the rear-view mirror that a car seemed to be following. How could he observe the plan without being trapped and killed at the cemetery? Hud was not a very clever man, but in this instance, under pressure, he devised a clever ruse. Near Princeton, he turned off the highway. At a hardware store, he bought a folding shovel and several large plastic bags. Into one of the bags, he put the rest of his purchase. In downtown Princeton, with the plastic bag in hand, he entered a restaurant. It was about noon. Observing Hud, Gabe asked his chief, "What's he taking that big bag with him to go eat lunch?" "Who knows?" Snake replied. "Don't matter. Long as his car is there, he ain't getting away from us." But Snake was wrong. After passing through the front door of the restaurant, Hud had immediately left through the rear door. Catching a taxi, he went straight to St. Mary's Cemetery. By the time the Delmonico gang in Princeton began to wonder why their associate was taking so long with lunch, Hud had already started digging the grave in Trenton. Upon discovering that they had been tricked, Snake ordered Jamal to drive their car at high speed to St. Mary's Cemetery. Unfortunately for Hud, they arrived just as the digger was completing the excavation. Driving into the cemetery, Jamal parked his vehicle beside the grave of Jeffrey Smith. "Well, looks like you've been busy," said Snake to a startled Hud. The latter didn't know what to say. All he could think was that he was about to die. Suddenly, into the cemetery burst 4 police cars. They halted beside the open grave. The Delmonticos wanted to escape, but they could see that it was futile to try. A Lieutenant Evans shouted, "You're all under arrest." To Snake he added, "You didn't think we'd forgotten about the Roma Bank job, did you? We've been following you since the release of Hud." "So what you gonna charge us with?" asked Snake. "That depends on what we find in the grave," replied the lieutenant. Gabe whispered to Snake, "They's gonna get us for murder. Wayne's body is down there." Snake smiled and replied, "No, he's not. I'm smarter than that. I had Hud buried the body, the tools, and the money in 3 separate graves. They's gonna find only the money here." Hud rolled his eyes at these words. End of story. Okay, if you hold on just a second, I'll give you the second story. Okay, the second one, plans that require other humans to follow guidelines rigidly always face an uncertain fate in the implementation. That's the lesson of a grave error. Happier and yet bittersweet is the following tale, entitled My 3 Friends. "Hi, my name is Gary. I seen you sitting there reading your book. You look kind of lonely. Maybe I can cheer you up a little. Don't feel like talking? Don't matter. We can sit here all day without saying a word, just enjoying the sights. Or maybe you'd prefer to hear me tell about my life. Everybody's got troubles, but sometimes it's good to hear about the lucky folk who don't have none. I don't mean to brag, but I'm just about the luckiest person in the whole wide world. When you hear about the wonderful life I got, it might make you feel better. But if you start feeling jealous, just speak up and I'll stop talking. I should start at the beginning, but I don't rightly know how things started. My pa died when I was 1, and my ma didn't like to talk about the early years. All I can say is that I was born somewhere in Kentucky, and now I'm somewhere between 35 and 40 years old. I ain't been keeping very good track of my age. There's no need to. When I was 8, a terrible accident killed Ma and left me a cripple for life. Ever since, I've been getting monthly checks from an insurance company. That's one of those lucky things I was telling you about. Everybody in America got to work, but not me. I can do whatever I want, and the free money keeps on coming every month. I even got my own home. When Ma died, they sent me to live with her brother, my Uncle Lester. Living with Lester weren't too bad. He only beat me when he was real drunk. And here's the second great thing about my life. Lester didn't make me go to no school neither. Every kid in America's got to go to school, but I didn't. Lester didn't like school because he couldn't read nor write. When I was about 15, Lester come home real drunk one day. He collapsed and died on the steps before he could even get into the door. Neighbors called the ambulance, but 'twas too late. The doctor said he drunk himself into the grave. Can you picture the situation? There I was, age 15, in charge of my life and the owner of a 3-room trailer. I didn't have to make no payments or nothing. I was just like a king. Most people that owns homes has got to worry about fires and such. I hear the neighbors complaining about the high cost of insurance. I don't let things like that bother me. Of course, the paint is peeling and water leaks in when it rains, but mostly I'm real comfortable with my house. Now let me tell you about my friends. Just 'cause a body is rich enough to own a house don't necessarily mean he's happy. People that don't got no friends is not happy. Well, I'm real happy. My neighbors don't think so. Mrs. Markle keeps bringing me brownies and doing other nice things for me. I heard her tell Mrs. Rowan that she felt sorry for me 'cause I lives alone and don't have no friends. But I do have friends, she just don't know. I has 3 of the greatest friends anyone could ever have. Their names is Shadow, Reflection, and Echo. Now, some folks has got friends that gets mad at 'em and all the time or goes away when there's trouble, but not my friends. Shadow, Reflection, and Echo never gets mad, and they is always around when I needs 'em. Of course, they're not just alike. Each one's got his own personality. Reflection is what they call an extrovert. He's bright and shiny, and he wants people to see what he's doing. Mostly he wants to do the same things I do. He copies me a lot 'cause he likes me. Shadow's just the opposite. He's kind of secretive and shy. He might be on account of his color. Some folk don't like people with dark color, you know. Maybe he feels self-conscious of his shape, too. I think he can't stay on a diet. Sometimes he's big and sometimes he's small. He probably ain't got much self-control. In winter, he likes to hibernate. Don't see much of him that time of year. But in summer, he's always hanging around. Echo is the friend I can count on the most. He comes whenever I call. There's just one problem with him, a speech defect. Sometimes he tries to say a word, but it don't come out right. He says it 3 or 4 times instead of once. Me and my friends has lots of fun together. Every morning after breakfast, I always comes to this park because I knows Shadow, Reflection, and Echo is waiting for me here. When I sits on this bench and looks in this pool, I sees Reflection making faces at me. It always makes me laugh to see him. And when I laugh, pretty soon he's laughing, and that makes me laugh even more. Some people in the park stare at us. They don't understand how much fun we're having. Echo likes to play hide and seek. Sometimes in the early morning when it's real quiet, I finds him easily. But sometimes I gotta search a lot. Shadow's a late riser. I think he's kind of lazy. But in the middle of the day, he's raring to go. That's when I race him in my wheelchair. Through the years, I've bought some special equipment to have more fun with my three friends. I'd have even more equipment if Harry Sullivan didn't always have such bad luck. Harry lives next door to me in the trailer park. Seems like every time my monthly check arrives, something awful happens to Harry or his family, so I have to loan him money. And then when it's time to pay me back, something else happens so he can't. Like last month, he got a hole in his pocket just when he was bringing me the money. Anyway, I do have some special equipment to use with my friends. At night, I often put a giant lantern on a table in the yard and shine it on the side of the trailer. Then I gets all sorts of objects in my hands, and we have the funnest shadow dances you ever saw. Here in the park, I sometimes brings a megaphone to make echoes all over the place. In the trailer, I puts on funny clothes and acts silly in front of a giant mirror. You should see what reflection does. Well, I think I gotta go now. It's almost lunchtime. I hope I cheered you up a little. Maybe you'll never be as rich and lucky as me. But if you can find three friends as good as mine, you'll always be happy. End of story. Next time on Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery, I'll have for you 2 more short stories. Thank you for watching my channel.